Welcome back. Joe Conzo Jr. is a retired FDNY EMT who dedicated his life to serving the city. He is also a 9/11 related cancer survivor and legendary Bronx photographer. Joe recently received an eviction notice along with his neighbors in the middle of this pandemic. We went out to Perry Avenue in the Bronx to speak to Joe in person. Let's check out his story. Joe Conzo, a retired FDNY medic, 9/11 hero, and cancer survivor, as well as legendary Bronx photographer, recently received an eviction notice along with his neighbors at 3245 Perry Avenue in the middle of a pandemic.
It's kind of like I don't know, a sledgehammer to your head, to your gut. So many different emotions: anxiety, depression, anger, and it was just, Christmas came and left, pretty much.
Conzo has been residing here on Perry Avenue for the last 35 years. According to this notice from Glacier Equities, the real estate private equity firm that now owns the building, Conzo and his neighbors were given 90 days to move out on or before their lease expires on March 31st. New York City's eviction moratorium, meant to protect tenants from being evicted, is set to expire the very same day.
It reminds me of the 70s and 80s where landlords were burning the buildings to collect the insurance. But today's just 21st century gentrification, where instead of burning the buildings, we're going to buy you out and push you out.
Conzo says he is not shying away from this fight, taking after his grandmother, Dr. Evelina Antonetti, and his mother, Lorraine Montenegro, two revered Bronx community activists.
It is in my blood. But, I want to enjoy my retirement. I don't want to get into the struggle. I just got over cancer, 9/11 related. How can you ask me to come out in the middle of a pandemic and look for a place to stay?
A Glacier Equities spokesperson provided a statement to BronxNet stating in part that a letter sent to Perry Avenue residents, quote, contained inaccurate information and caused unnecessary alarm. No tenants will be evicted by staying past March 31st, and we apologize for giving anyone that impression, end quote. Conzo says he believes that firm leader Miles J. Horn is not a bad person. In fact, in 2017, Horn helped provide housing to slain NYPD officer Familia's children.
I know he has a heart. So I just want to let him know that he won't be remembered for that. He'll be remembered for kicking people out today.
Reporting for BronxNet, Sonyi Lopez. Joining us now to share updates on that eviction notice and more is Joseph Conzo Jr. Welcome, Joe. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So, Joe, just to start, we, saw your story. We shared it with our viewers as well. And I'm sure a lot of folks have heard about your story. You're known in the Bronx for sure. But can you tell us about your experience with receiving this eviction notice and what exactly happened?
I mean, it like in the story, it was a punch to the gut receiving a letter 2 days before Christmas saying that you have to vacate in 90 days of your home that you've called, of a place that you've called home for over 25 years. So that in itself just put a whole damper on the whole holiday season. So after receiving that, my instincts kicked in and my gut reaction, and I started emailing everybody. I emailed the property management, and I emailed, local politicians, and I just notified the world, so to speak. And only a handful of people got back to me. I was like, oh, wow. But it was important to let people know what was going on, because especially during this pandemic, none of this should be going on. And I understand about, capitalism and, people buy and sell things all the time. But when you're talking about people's lives being uprooted just because you became the new owner and you invested money into it, there has to be a better solution, a better way.
Right. And as we know, Joe, Glacier Equities, the new owner, recently did apologize for sending this letter out. And they seem to have had a change of heart. Are you and your neighbors feeling safe with their word?
Listen, I'm a young 57-year-old man born and raised in the Bronx and have seen lots of promises over the years dating back to the 60s and 70s, from politicians to community. It's just, talk is cheap, and I don't mean to put it that way, but I got to give credit where credit is due, and I appreciate the owner, Miles Horn, reaching out to me directly saying, hold on, this is not what we want. This is not how we want to run our properties. I'm apologizing to you, to the world on television that, this is not how I run my business. And I got to give credit to him for doing that. But again, until I see things, talk is cheap. And I've seen lots of promises made to the people of the Bronx in my lifetime. And until, until actions are taken, I won't believe a word anybody says.
And Joe, when we spoke in person over that story, you compared gentrification to the burning of the Bronx back in the 70s. Can you share how gentrification has fueled the eviction and displacement of Bronx tenants?
I mean, it's a vicious circle that's been happening for decades and decades and decades. You know what I mean? Everybody has their own interpretation of gentrification. I mean, it can be interpreted so many different ways. The Hispanic people, when we migrated from Puerto Rico in the 40s and 50s, we essentially did it also, from the Lower East Side up into the Bronx, pushing the Jewish people up to Co-op City. Co-op City was built for the Jewish people, but we invaded Co-op City and they migrated further up north. But, again, it just, what happened to me was just, it was just a different form of landlords burning the buildings back in the Bronx during the 70s and 80s to collect the insurance money and to get rid of the people that were living there. So you fast forward to 2021, we're not going to burn down the buildings anymore, but we are going to change the rent rules and the regulations and the laws that empower us as landlords or owners of cooperative buildings to push people out of color, mainly of color, that can't afford $250,000 for an apartment. For that type of money, you would invest in a house. You know what I mean? I'm a retired city worker. I'm living off a pension. I'm living off a Social Security disability because of the 9/11 cancers. So my income is limited. So it's a vicious cycle that continues. And if you do some research on Glacier Equities and the owners, he pretty much states that, people are priced out of Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens. So what's the next best place? The Bronx.
Mm-hmm. And Joe, something that we're familiar with is that you're no stranger to activism. Your grandmother, Evelina Antonetti, and your mother, Lorraine Montenegro, who were two strong activists in the community. Can you tell us just about the importance of continuing this work, regardless, I know you said you were tired and it's taking a lot and activism.
Listen, it's my family legacy. Yes, I expressed that I was tired. I just want to enjoy my retirement and stuff, but it's not going to happen. You know what I mean? Because I'm the first one with the biggest mouth to step up and say something. And I get that from my mother and my grandmother, who both have streets named after them. And they're probably the only mother and daughter street namings in the entire country. There's schools named after my grandmother. There's buildings named after my mother. And, I took a different route. Instead of community activism, I went into saving lives and delivering babies as a paramedic with the New York City Fire Department. But, as a union laborist, I was the vice president of my union that represented 4,000 EMTs and paramedics. It's in my blood to go toe to toe with politicians and people who think that they're better, or not better, but people that don't treat us Bronxites as human beings. So, I use my platform.
And when we talk about, utilizing your platform also, Joe, just, you know, your hopes about your relationship with this new owner moving forward, and also your relationship with your neighbors, and how important it is for other people throughout the Bronx to also advocate for their rights and understand that, you know, if you receive an eviction notice, you have rights as a person, as a human being. And, you know, moving forward, how can people also emulate that strength?
Well, let me tell you something. My grandmother had a saying, no hay mal que por bien no venga. There isn't any bad that happened that good does not come out of it. And what's come out of this for me is I've learned a whole lot about real estate laws and tenants' rights and things of that nature. And it's opened up a new world to me. What I'm hoping through this campaign of ours, that it encourages or it enlightens other tenants that A, they're not alone, B, there are groups out there that they can reach out to, and C, that they have rights. They have rights. Even though most of the rights will probably lean towards the owners or landlords, just like landlords have rights.
Mm-hmm.
We all have rights. And, we have to point out the inequities that are going on. So, hopefully, the message comes across that it's not just Joe Conzo, the retired EMT, cancer survivor, 9/11. It's more than that. I'm just a face to the hundreds of people that received these notices 2 days before Christmas. And since your airing, I've received, dozens of emails from other tenants across the borough and even in Manhattan, applauding, what we're doing here in this building. And, so it's to enlighten people that they have rights. And that's what it's always been. I mean, the struggle from the 60s and 70s, it's always been, we have basic human rights as Bronxites, as Puerto Ricans, as Black and brown people. We have rights. You know what I mean? And don't tread on our rights.
100%. Thank you so much, Joe, again for your time, and thank you for the inspiration and for, being a staple in the community as well as a hero. It will never be, forgotten or lost on us that you.
Thank you for what you guys do.
Of course. Thank you again.
Yeah.
Folks, you can follow Joe, get connected with Joe and see his work. You also stay in touch with him on Instagram and Facebook, Twitter, all over the place at Joe Conzo. He also has a website, joeconzo.com. We'll be right back.